Hi, I'm Carson Lloyd, and I'll be your host for today's podcast titled America's Distorted Worldviews. A 2016 study from the American Council on Science and Health concluded that only 6% of Americans believe the world is getting better. The pessimistic attitude of Americans is similarly echoed throughout the West's developed countries. Contrast these alarming statistics with clear and overwhelming evidence of astonishing improvements in standard of living for the majority of the world's population over the last 30 years, and the inconsistencies are puzzling. Standard of living is defined by Merriam-Webster as the necessities, comforts, and luxuries enjoyed or aspired to by an individual or group. Why do so many people in the West think the world is getting worse? First, for some facts. In 1988, there were 26 active wars. As of 2018, there were just 13. There were 85 autocracies. In 2016, there are 60. 37% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty, which is categorized as living on $1 or less a day. Today, that number stands at around 10%. There were over 60,000 nuclear weapons. As of 2016, there were just over 10,000. Let's take a step back from the world as a whole and look at the United States specifically. According to renowned Harvard cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker, life in the United States today is far better than it was even 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there were 8.5 homicides for every 100,000 Americans, 3.5 million tons of particulate matter, and a poverty rate of 12%. Today, there are 5.3 homicides for every 100,000, 21 million tons of particulate matter, and the poverty rate of 7%. Pinker's celebrated 2018 book, Enlightenment Now, discusses these gains and explores the puzzling prevalence of American pessimism despite them. It's important to note that there are some key areas where progress has declined or stagnated in the last 40 years in the United States specifically, and worth exploring whether the majority of Americans' belief that the world is getting worse is justified. According to a Pew Research study conducted in 2018, American paychecks have grown at a steady rate, but not exceeding the pace of inflation, leaving the average American's buying power stagnant. This is not to say that the United States' growth is stagnating. Compare this with the astronomical increases of buying power from 1895 to 2000, and the current movement to return to a past gone by gains some credibility. Financial data from the National Bureau of Economic Research indicates that between 2009 and 2020, the United States saw its longest contiguous period of economic expansion. If the United States economy is expanding faster than the rate of inflation, why are those gains not reflected in the buying power of the average American? Well, according to that same study from Pew Research, and I quote, wage gains have gone largely to the highest earners. Since 2000, usual weekly wages have risen 3%, in real terms, among workers in the lowest 10% of the earnings distribution, and 4.3% among the lowest quarter. But among people in the top 10% of the distribution, real wages have risen a cumulative 15.7 to $2,112 a week, which is nearly 5 times the usual weekly earnings of the bottom 10th. In addition to poor economic outlook for the average American, healthcare is arguably even worse. According to the Commonwealth Fund study conducted in 2015, the United States spends roughly twice as much as the average OECD country, but has the lowest life expectancy and the highest suicide rates among the 11 nations. We have the highest chronic disease burden and an obesity rate that is 2 times higher than the OECD average. According to the World Happiness Report, Americans are more unhappy in 2020 than we've been in 50 years. So is the world getting worse? No, just America. So why do Americans believe the world is going to hell when the data suggests otherwise? American media coverage of other countries is broadly negative in nature, which leads Americans to believe that the quality of life and standard of living in those countries is declining as well. America's media is really good at diverting attention outward. Americans want to believe that we are the best and that the problems in the outside of our world far exceed our own. But these distortions of the facts mask real, critical, existential crises we face in this country and provide false realities that don't magnify the work that will be required to right the course.